Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to the second day of the 18th Vermont Organics Recycling Summit. I'm Natasha Duarte, the director of the Composting Association of Vermont. The summit is organized by our organization in partnership with the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. And this year's summit, like last year's, and I think the one before that, is being held as part of International Compost Awareness Week, which starts this coming Sunday. So we're a kickoff event of sorts. And ICAW is the largest and most comprehensive education initiative of the compost industry. So it's really fun to have the summit be part of that wider program. This year's theme is Compost, Nature's Climate Champion. And I do want to just give a little shout out to the poster here on the right. This is from a project by UVM students in Dr. Deb Nair's Composting Ecology and Management class at the University of Vermont. And if folks want to see more, I'll be highlighting different posters throughout this week. But if folks want to see more, you can go to compostingvermont.org/VORS, and there's a whole gallery of them. And if you click on them, you can read the students' inspiration for their artistic creation. So we have a lot of fun with this partnership with UVM students. I'd like to also thank all of our sponsors and exhibitors this year. We were back in person yesterday, so we had the fun chance to have exhibitors in person again. This year, we're being supported by Community Bank, Eco Products, Addison County Solid Waste Management District, AgriLab Technologies, Casella, Food Cycler, Nature Cycle, Vermont Natural Ag Products, Viably, CV Compost, the Vermont Produce Program from the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, and Woods and Laboratories. So huge thanks to everybody for supporting us. It's really with the support from these organizations that let us put the virtual program on completely for free, as well as supporting us being back in person for one day this week. So super great to have such a wonderful community. Here we are today, April 30th, and we are at the 1 o'clock session, Urban Abundance, Neighborhood Composting, and Food Rescue. We're going to be hearing from 3 fabulous presenters, and I am personally been hearing little bits about different parts of this project, so I am very excited to be seeing what it is you all have been up to together. And so with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and invite John Culpepper to share his screen and get us going.
Great, thank you. It's a delight to be here with you today. I'm John Culpepper. I'm co-founder of Compost for Good. And a little bit about Compost for Good. There are 3 of us, myself, one of my children, Katie, on top of the rock there, and Jennifer Perry, who is a project manager and a professional grant writer. So I want you to just drink this image in for a moment. This is what we normally think of when we think about walking in nature or our local forests. We don't, however, think about the stuff that's underground enough, at least in my opinion. Some of these slides are going to have a lot of information on them, so I've highlighted what I want as sort of the takeaway on each slide here. So the takeaway from this slide is that the plants out there in the wild are going through this energy-intensive process to produce photosynthates, primarily sugars and other compounds. And in some cases, those plants will pump up to 50% of those sugars into the root zone. And so my question is, why on earth would a plant do this? Well, I'll get back to that in just a second. But I want to know how we know what's in the soil, or for that matter, what's in compost. And for this matter, or I used to believe, like a lot of us, that I could walk up to a compost pile and through my senses, I could smell it, I could look at it, I could feel it, and I could tell you whether it was high-value compost or not. Well, turns out that I've been wrong all this time. You really can't do that. You can tell the difference between really nasty compost and pretty good compost, but in order to know whether it's got a robust microbiological life in it, you've got to look at it under a microscope. So when we were making compost piles, what we're really doing is we're stewarding the microbes that do all of the work for us. And there's a lot of them. I'm going to focus on that third bullet there. Most of us know that in a gram of soil, there are lots and lots of individual organisms, up to 1 billion bacteria alone. But did we know that in a gram of soil or good compost, there could be up to 70,000 different species of bacteria? I find that absolutely remarkable. There's a lot of emerging research out there. I'm going to touch on a little bit of the research, but what I want to focus here on is the fact that there's so much that we don't know. I was trained as a classic soil scientist. All the universities that I have attended had all the really great training, but there's just a lot about soil science that is just now emerging. So some benefits of a robust soil microbiome, in other words, a soil with lots of microbiological life in it. Most important bullet point here is if farmers or other land managers can create this diversity in their soils, we create managing sports fields or whatever. You're producing a better product, or quite possibly a better product for less inputs and therefore less money. So I want to look at farming and gardening and lawn care through a different kind of lens, what I would like to call a biological lens, what many people call biological farming. And this is farming that still takes into account all of the traditional physical, chemical properties of the soil. Those are all still very important, and knowing about those properties is very important. But what we're learning more and more is that we really need to know what sort of microbiology is in the soil, if in fact we want to produce high nutrient dense foods and really nice landscapes. So this kind of farming can work for row cropping. It can work for pasture lands, raising pigs, chickens, cows, you name it. There are a lot of people in this field of biological farming, but I want to highlight two. The first is Dr. Elaine Ingham, and she has come up with this organization called the Soil Food Web. And full transparency, I am a student of the Soil Food Web and a certified soil microscopist. My next portion of this course is to become a certified consultant. So this is sort of a picture of what that Soil Food Web represents. What I want you to understand is that there are different energy levels in any kind of ecosystem. The soil food web has a number of trophic levels. It's very important to know about those and to understand those. So the soil food web, I think, can be simplified this way. Bacteria break down organic matter and minerals, literally break down sand, silts, and clays, and organic material. Fungi do the same. Both of those organisms produce glues that bind things together, and which is great. You need those bacteria and fungi, but until you have the protozoa, nematodes, and other things that eat bacteria and fungi and themselves, you don't have a full, complete soil food web. So just take a look at this for a second. This is very important to farmers in particular who want to use biological farming. All the way to the left are highly disturbed soils, all the way to the right, minimally disturbed or soils that are not disturbed, and they contain some of our old growth forests. If you go around the world and you sample soils beneath these different kinds of micro environments, you'll find different soil life. And if you're a farmer, and if you want to raise things like blueberries, raspberries, perennial plants, grapes, you name it, you want to have a soil that has a certain ratio of bacteria to fungi. Otherwise, you're going to promote those kinds of plants that thrive in environments where perhaps annual weeds thrive. If you're raising brassicas, you want to be down in the annual weeds area. You want highly disturbed soils, or you might. At any rate, you want highly bacterial soils because brassicas are basically weeds that we eat. Dr. David Johnson is another one who I want to point out. If you know of David, he's an amazing. I strongly encourage you to find him online. And this is what he's known for a lot of things, but he and his wife are known for the Johnson Sioux bioreactor. This is a system whereby you can produce highly fungally dominant composts that you can use to inoculate soils to increase the numbers and species diversity of fungi in soils. So in soil microbiology, these are the stars. I've already mentioned them. And we're going to go through and just have a quick look at them. Bacteria, this is at, all these images I think are at 400 total magnification. So bacteria are the small round dots in the background, at least in this slide. They can be rod-shaped. They can be lots of different shapes, but bacteria are important. Bacteria in motion. You see them wiggling just a little bit in the background. This is called Brownian motion. And fungi is another big star in our compost piles and in our soils. If you can see my cursor, you can see a fungal strand right here, and it is actually growing out of a fungal spore right here. Another fungal strand, protozoa. So remember, bacteria and fungi are your primary consumers, and then you need organisms that eat bacteria and fungi. Protozoa are one of those organisms. So up here in the upper right is a testate amoeba. This little fellow right here can eat up to 1,000 bacteria in a day. And each time they consume a bacteria, they release nitrogen in a plant available form, typically in the form of ammonium. Nematodes, these are the big players in soil. Most of us know of nematodes as things that you don't want in your garden, but there's only one kind of nematode that you don't want to see too much of, and that's a root-feeding nematode. All the rest of them are excellent at consuming things in your soil, releasing those plant-available nutrients. Microarthropods are bigger organisms that eat things like nematodes and other smaller mite-like organisms. So we all, I think most of us who know much about soil know that we want good soil aggregation. We want soils that drain well and that have good structure, what farmers call good tilth. The way to get soil aggregation is the bacteria produce glues that make little micro aggregates. Fungi come along, they produce glues, and then they start wrapping these micro aggregates, forming macro aggregates. And those macro aggregates are what we want. They vastly increase surface area. That's where water holds out or hangs out. These are spaces where lots and lots of bacteria and other microbes hang out. And they are, and good soil aggregation is what allows both rapid movement of water through soil, but also soils that hold a lot of water. And here we see macro aggregates in the process of forming. By the way, I took all of these images, and in here you can see another testate amoeba, and then you can see micro aggregates that are beginning to come together to form macro aggregates. And that's the goal of biological farming. One of the goals is to form good soils that drain well. This can and in sandy soils, you can form aggregates that actually reduce the rate at which water moves through and reduce the rate at which gas exchange moves through. And this is important because too much gas exchange means you're oxidizing a lot of the organic material in the soil. So nutrient cycling through the lens of biological farming is where you get natural nutrients that are cycled. In other words, almost all soils contain everything that plants need. They're just not in a plant available form. They're bound up. They're not available to plant root hairs. But when you get this complete cast of characters underground, they can cycle nutrients in such a way that release these plant available nutrients and therefore reduce the inputs that you have to add, reduce or eliminate fertilizers altogether. So how do we establish that biology in our soils? Well, we do that through composting. For the purpose of this talk, I want you to think about compost as a way to inoculate soils that need the microorganisms that they've lost over time due to soil disruption, due to the application of high salt fertilizers, through the application of pesticides. So we're re-inoculating our soils with good compost. What's good compost? Well, you don't know until you test it under a microscope. So this is a slide of examples of organics that can be composted. Most of them you're aware of, but some you might not be aware of. Compost for Good, we have a research and demonstration facility here in Jay, New York, where we're processing diverted human urine through a high temperature composting regimen, creating high value compost. Katie here is sitting on about a cubic yard of high value compost that came from nothing more than compressed wood pellets and diverted human urine. We've processed at this facility about 1,500 gallons of human urine. Katie is also sitting on a pile, a 1 cubic yard pile that is about the same amount of material that is produced when a adult human is composted. Composting is now, human remains composting is now legal in 8 states. New York became one of the most recent one. Vermont has been a state that allows composting of human remains for quite some time. And this is just to show that our urine processing is a family affair. Okay, that's my indication that I need to stop soon. So I'm going to get into some simple systems that you might be interested in. Everybody's familiar with 3-base systems. You might not be familiar with systems like this that you can create from straw bales or hay bales. This is a system I designed 12 feet wide by 20 feet long. It's a building that gets composted in the end. When it's full, food scraps and wood chips, then it's capped with old compost. The top is taken off and the entire building then decomposes. Aerated static piles are sort of the newest iteration of compost technology. And in-vessel designs are another really good way to compost things, especially like food scraps. This is one that I designed with a friend of mine, and it's available on our website, free and available to anyone who would like it. But this is a system that I'm working on currently, and you're going to hear a little bit more about this in just a minute. This is a vertical batch system, and I'm really quite excited about this. I'll skip that slide. Again, think of compost as inoculant for soils, if your soils need more biology in them. Compost can be applied in lots of ways. Most of us know this, either through direct application of compost, compost extract, or compost tea, which is a little more involved than compost extract. The key to successful composting programs, and we've heard this in this summit, is to have one person who champions the composting process. It doesn't have to be the same person who actually does the composting, but one person who you can count on to go by the compost system, whatever you've got set up, every several days, just to make sure things are going well. It's easy enough to get good biology in our soils. It's a little more difficult to keep that biology in the soil. But there are some basic steps that you can take in order to do that. And I think this may be my last slide, but I want you to, most of us understand that our oceans are the largest carbon sink on the planet, but did you know that soils are the second largest carbon sink on the planet? You can go from a farm that's a carbon emitter, and in the course of 1 year, 18 months, 2 years, to a farm that's a carbon sink. And that's simply by changing some of your management practices, but mostly it's about getting good biology back in soils. Primary takeaway, there are a lot of them here in this talk, but mostly we should be plants, microbes have co-evolved over millions of years. They know what they're doing. They do a great job. What we need to do is to understand that. So I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I think, Bo, I think you're up next.
Yeah, Bo, take it away and go ahead and share your screen, and just remember to check that little audio box.
Got you. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see this all good.
Yep, looks great.
Okay, great. So thanks so much for the thorough introduction, John. Is such a abundance of wisdom and has been so instrumental in inspiring this pilot. And I just want to also highlight that this pilot was really kind of started in a sense like 4 years ago when I was attending VORS virtually in 2020. And I was so motivated by John sharing all these in-vessel designs. And I was like, this is totally possible in an urban environment. But the only, processing facilities I'm aware of are just outside of our community. And so just really wanting to hone in on an accessible system for, the living circumstances of being in an urban environment and being a renter, and working with small amounts of space. So we're so grateful to like the CAV community, and it's really special that 4 years later now I have been leading this pilot in Burlington that really just started with this connection through VORS. So I'll just share a bit about what it's taken for us to get started, what the process has looked like for us, just the joys of the experience, and where we're hoping to head from here. So to start, these are the materials that we needed. We received a culvert donation from Compost for Good so that we could start this process. And so we are using the vertical batch system that John just shared with you, which is predominantly receiving aeration through augering. We also have a chimney inserted in the center, so that's another material that we had to source. Our carbon source, and then something to move around the food scraps, which we have been able to do with a bike pickup and a bike trailer that was donated to us from our bike advocacy friends. So community has definitely been a big part of getting this off the ground, and we've been having a lot of fun with it. This is some top-down imagery, so you can kind of get a sense for what we're looking at. So that pipe in the middle is a perforated plastic pipe. It's just sitting there as, you know, the pile builds, and it's less important in the beginning, but you'll see it's very important as we layer atop the vertical horizon. So we're using food scraps, we're using wood shavings that we're getting from a local hardwood carpenter, all donated, and we also have struck gold with a source for spent mushroom substrate with a local mushroom farmer called Funge. And again, just super gracious, offering us all this material for free. We have found with our process that one drum can support 50 to 75 pounds of food scraps per week. This can vary in terms of what that means for households. But in general, we have been working with collecting between 5 to 8 households for a single drum. And here is some images, well, some videos actually, for you all to see the aeration process. So as mentioned, the critical chimney. And so you can see that this is also just allowing a place for emissions to escape from the bottom. And that video that you're seeing here, this was in January. So we have our food scraps still decomposing in there, but it is a very hot pile. And then over here, I have a video demonstrating the augering process. So here, the soil is just about to be released from, or the material, which, you know, is quickly becoming soil, is about to be released from the vessel. And I'm just here sort of demonstrating the augering process. But at this point, it's already really well aerated. And yeah, you can see the snow and how hot it was. And that was mid-February. So, you know, big picture, the timeline we have roughly estimated, just based on what we've witnessed, it to be about 8 weeks long. So that looks like adding food scraps actively for the first 5 weeks. Really, you know, somewhat frequently augering between week 3 and week 7, releasing the pile around week 7. And then allowing it to cool down after sorting through that. So by the time we've released the pile, the temperature data that we've taken has shown us that the material has already gone through primary and secondary decomposition. So it finishes outside the vessel, but it's most active inside the vessel. And the frequency of the augering depends on sort of where it's at in that arc of that process. When it's super hot, we're definitely augering with a frequency, making sure that it's staying aerated. Again, this being an in-vessel system, it's not for those who wish to have a passive setup. Though, like I said, you know, the first few weeks, it can be somewhat passive as you're just building the mass inside the vessel. And once we release it, this is where the fun happens. So we have hosted several demo days, and they've just kind of become like soil sorting parties where we get together and just remove whatever pieces have not yet decomposed. You know, with this setup, there are pockets of that have gone anaerobic. And so we just kind of sort through the whole thing, pull out anything that hasn't gone through proper decomposition that might attract critters or it might be harmful to critters. And we just throw that into the next pile. We give it a classic turn. You can see, you know, the sorting happening in this second panel here. And then after we've sorted it, it looks like this pile in the third panel here. And then the fourth image is just a little coating of wood shavings that we put on top to reduce, any odors, again, that just might bring attention. But in our observations, we have not had any issues with animals yet, and we are carefully monitoring the temperature, tracking this process as we go. And here's some of that data. So we started using this system and started our first pile a year ago, like I mentioned, but we didn't actually get serious and start tracking temperature until August because we just didn't want to buy anything, and we're hoping to get a Rio temp thermometer donated, but that didn't happen. So if anybody does have a connection with Rio temp or just access to free thermometers, please reach out. That's something that is, we can't compromise on that material. We really do need that to continue supporting tracking these piles. Here I'm just showing some preliminary data. The blue line indicates the top horizon temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. The yellow line indicates just a foot below there. So not fully on the bottom, but we are starting to capture more of a vertical profile. Here we're just kind of capturing sort of the active top portion of the profile. And as you can see, our summer pile never really hit 131. And we believe that was simply just because of the lack of volume and mass. At the time, we were composting food scraps with one other household and a co-op, and unfortunately we just didn't have the material to get it hot enough, despite the temperatures being pretty hot. And so you can see in comparison our February to March pile, when we were collecting from 6 households and a business, was super hot. And we were really producing soil at a much faster rate at that point as well. So we're really excited to see, how this system has been evolving. And here I'm just also sharing a bit of context for the augering frequency. So you can see the orange stars on these graphs are days that we augured, and the blue stars indicate precipitation events, either rain or snow. And the precipitation events we only recorded for this February to March pile. So it's not that there wasn't any precipitation March to April, but the main takeaway from these 2 different piles that we found was not just, having a large mass, but like the frequency of how that mass was added. And, anybody who's, composting up close or taking a course knows that, the rate at which you're adding mass and how much mass you add, like precipitation, aeration, all these factors, obviously they're the baseline of like how you're, controlling the conditions of your pile. But it's really cool to see these same parallels in this in-vessel system, and know that we have total control and that we can actually speed up the process if we tweak a few of those variables. Also, I'll just acknowledge that this isn't truly a continuous process. I'm kind of using this language vaguely to demonstrate that here we were adding food scraps at a rate of like, 50 pounds a week. Whereas March to April, we were adding food scraps. We kind of waited until week 3 to add anything. And then we added like 150 pounds of food scraps at once. And then another 100 pounds a week later. So just slightly different approaches and slightly different responses and timelines in that respect. And so we're super happy with this system. We want to share it with people. And that's how we got connected with Vermont Engineers Construction Inc. They have an abundance of this material that has been deemed unusable for their projects. And all of this high density polyethylene was destined to go to a landfill, and we connected with the right person and were able to divert it from the landfill and upcycle it to use it for compost systems that we can now share with others. So in terms of that site expansion, we have, 4 locations now in the new North End. One of them's a business and one of them's a homestead, and we're starting to work with chicken manure. So adjusting our recipe a little bit for certain sites. We're also being more intentional about tracking exactly how much mass of food scraps we're processing each week. And like I said, like the temperature monitoring is getting a little bit more refined as well. And we are expanding sites to other neighborhoods. So we have 2 sites just established in this past week in the Old North End in downtown. And we have 2 households interested and excited in the material to build in Winooski in the South End as well. So like I said, we're gonna need some thermometers. So reach out if you have the plug. And here's just some like big vision dreams. You know, we want to continue doing soil food web analysis with Compost for Good and looking at the biological quality of these piles that we're building. We would like to run some field trials this summer and maybe send in some soil tests to Woods End. We have some fundraising events coming up, a plant cell and a bike tuning space. And we are just now establishing bike routes for each one of these new sites that I just mentioned, as well as always, you know, tracking advocacy work with the zoning office to examine what ordinance amendments could be made to allow conditional use for in-vessel systems in the urban landscape. So all that being said, you know, this is kind of what we all know, but I just want to state there's so much non-material value from composting at this scale. You know, with these demo days, I have witnessed and been a part of knowledge and skill sharing, experiencing ecosomatic therapy, both on my own and with others, really enjoying the space that we make that feels safe with each other, that is like appropriate for any age and someone with any background and experience, and just building these connections with folks who care about food security and healthy soil in their own backyard. And none of this would be possible without the abundant network that we have been a part of and benefiting from, and also, you know, offering to and with. And so just want to say that while we are only composting at the backyard scale right now, we're definitely operating as a community, and there's a lot going into it, and we're excited to expand more. And with that, I will stop sharing so Sarah can take over and share a bit about food rescue in this community.
Thank you so much, Bo. And to the audience, participants, I want to just say that there are a couple questions that have come in. We're going to still hold them and let Sarah present, and then we'll be digging into the questions and comments and offers and suggestions. So thank you so much for that. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks for John and Bo setting me up so well. I'm just gonna get a little bit into food recovery as part of the compost diversion diversion of organics from the landfill, and the collection of food scraps from food recovery events was crucial to starting this composting project. Yeah, so I'm going to get a little bit into that. Kind of the motivation for this and the relevance to this conference is that food waste is a huge contributor to climate change. The USDA estimates that we waste over a third of the food that we produce in the US. And this contributes 170 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent greenhouse gases annually. That is a colossal amount of stuff we're emitting, and a lot of it could be prevented through proper food diversion before we have to compost it or anaerobic digest it. And you can see here an EPA hierarchy of organics, first in preventing food, and then, you know, getting it to humans that would, you know, benefit through increased food access, eating it, upcycling it, and then, you know, feeding it to animals and composting the rest. Or, you know, there are some other options down the line as well. Vermont as a state has also established a very similar, you know, upside down pyramid food hierarchy to this one. But this is just to say that, you know, when we think about composting, most of us interact with composting at the residential level, and our connection to that is through like food scraps composting. But that's only about 40% of the food waste that happens in the US, and another about 40% happens from retail loss. Another big sector is on, farm level loss, and that isn't as big of a focus for me in these efforts because that is, already on the land, so it's easier to create compost or till that in or, turn it back into soil more readily. So I hope to propose in this section of the presentation that our community composting scale system has the potential to not only tackle that residential level food loss and food waste, but also retail loss food waste or retail food waste. And I'll show you some examples of that later in the presentation. So why is this food wasted, right? You can see on the right an image of what this is retail level food waste. Why is perfectly good food being thrown away? This is many reasons. I'm sure you all are familiar with these. Stores need to over order because they're not sure exactly what customers will buy and they don't want to run out and lose customers. They want to present good quality produce so people keep coming back and are excited about the quality and freshness of the produce being offered at that store. So we have really high preferences as consumers, and it's in retailers' interest to stand up to those preferences and meet them. So we also need to consider that, retailers, they're operating on a margin and they have a lot of profit considerations and maybe labor limitations. So that all leads to food waste. There's also food safety and handling limitations, things need to be, cold things need to stay cold, hot things need to stay hot. They can only be set out for a certain amount of time. So all of that can lead to food waste at the retail level and at the residential or community level. To absorb this, there's not always the capacity to absorb this from retailers. So, food banks tend to prioritize non-perishable goods. And, they're limited in staffing and funding as well. So they might not be able to pick up all the food that a grocer produces. They might have limitations in their ability to store this in fridges as is required for food safety. So there are all sorts of reasons. This only touches on a few why good food is wasted. But there's a huge potential for recovery. I think nationwide, certainly. I was interested in this issue locally. I live in Burlington. So I, tried to call around to some grocers to see if there was food available for pickup. And it's really hard to get interest back from grocers. They're probably very busy and, have a lot of fish they're frying. The only responses I really got were like, no, we don't have any food that's being wasted that's available for pickup, or we're currently donating all of the food that is safe to consume. So either like there's nothing available or anything available is already being donated. But then if you take a look around the back end, which, food recovery through dumpster diving is legal in all 50 states. It's federally legal. City ordinances can make it illegal, but in Burlington it is fully legal. So if you want to take a look around the back end of your grocery store to kind of start a discussion to make sure you check your city ordinance, but it's probably fine. And these are some pictures of what I found, right? So there's a ton of really good quality produce. This is just from one day of all sorts of fruit and vegetables. These are just the produce bins. There are also many other like dairy bins, bread bins, all sorts of other things from different departments in the store, of things that are being thrown out. And this is on a daily basis. So from my observations, there are like 4 to 5 bins wheeled out every single day. This size from like a medium or small scale grocery store. Some producing even more than that. So what can we do about this? Some individuals are, you know, there are dumpster divers, there are community food banks, there is small scale recovery going on, and a way that this food can be distributed to the community. In Burlington, we have a community fridge. This is a place where anyone can drop by food, and it's usually fully emptied out by the end of the day. It is very popular. People really utilize this resource. And we also have a team that volunteers every day to check that fridge and make sure the stuff in it is good, safe to eat, and presentable, and properly labeled. And then we also have dispersed pantries around Burlington. They're kind of just adapting the free little libraries idea. And instead of books, we put mostly non-perishable goods or things that don't need refrigeration in these, and they're also highly utilized. Within Burlington, there's the potential for neighborhood planning assemblies to monitor these and set even more up, but funding is needed to kind of increase the infrastructure available for these and maybe fund some labor as well. But these are just examples of things that you can find in the dumpster that stores have not been able to sell or decided not to sell. And then if we want to step it up another scale, which I was interested in doing, we can do community food recovery. So I established community cook nights in Burlington where anyone is available to come and cook food together at my house. And then I also reached out to, I live in a housing co-op, and I reached out to the other co-ops in town, and they were interested and able to host a cook night once a week as well. So now we have, you know, scaled up to having a cook night all 7 days of the week. And we have also been trying to work with grocers, so you know we don't have to go around the back end. We can just have them divert the food for us, and we'll go ahead and pick it up from the managers. So you can see on the top right image with all the banana boxes, that's 12 banana boxes worth of food, and that's the amount of produce that one store produced in one day, and they produce about this much food every single day. And we only had the capacity to pick up from the store on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but on the days we didn't pick up, it all went in the bins to get composted or anaerobically digested, which, you know, I'm grateful that it's not headed towards the landfill. But you might see from the quality of this food that it's, you know, it's far from being unsafe to eat or, you know, unfit for human consumption. So one barrier to getting this food out is a lot of people that are interested in free food might not have access to a kitchen to prepare it. And a lot of the stuff that we're receiving is produce that needs to be cooked, or, you know, people would be more excited about it if it is cooked. So that's why we have these community cook nights where we get from anywhere between 5 and 20 plus volunteers every night coming to cook food. We also sit around and eat dinner together from some of the food we cooked. And then we collaborate with Food Not Bombs, which is just a local mutual aid kind of food access related group. And we give it to them to serve at their daily lunch every day, served out of a parking garage downtown. And this contributes to, you know, over 30 meals a day that we're able to produce from this food that would otherwise be wasted, or turned into compost, I should say, or anaerobically digested. Another note is down on the bottom left, that pantry is kind of a larger scale version of that, the like community front yard, free little library style pantries. And this, in addition to all the other smaller pantries, is an example of how we pick up from bakery produce, or bakery waste. So all the stuff they didn't sell that day, we'll pick it up from a few local bakeries, and people are really excited about this super high quality and fresh bread. So yeah, that's kind of the stuff we're doing. And when we have a cook night, you might see it up in the, I'll point you to the top right picture again with all the banana boxes worth of produce. From all of that and all the cooking, we only produce a 5-gallon bucket of food scraps or less. So this is a demonstration of how at a community composting scale, we can still tackle larger streams of food waste that is still salvageable, such as retail waste, if we properly are diverting that food according to the food waste hierarchy. We actually have very few food scraps we end up with to compost, and that is certainly an amount that is manageable at our community scale. So things that we're excited about moving forward with SoilCycle BTV and food rescue in mind are we're hoping to have all the places that host these cook nights as not only, community cooking areas, but also food scraps drop-off areas for those who don't have access to other options, and also a training opportunity for composting. So we've already started this. This is one of our SoilCycle and composters designed by John that we have set up at my house. And you can see to the left is kind of our old, we had a 3-bay system that we consolidated just to finish it off there. And we're really excited about this new system and the speed at which it composts, because that pile to the left is a 2-year-old pile. And then we're interested in increasing food pickups from grocers so we don't have to go around the back end, and just the potential for collaboration there. And then also just doing a survey on food waste to kind of get an idea of the state of food waste in Burlington, why food is wasted, what amounts are wasted, are there strategies in place or interest in creating strategies to prevent food loss or food waste. And this would not only include grocers, but smaller food recovery groups, as well as the charitable food sector, which also wastes food, and just kind of get a better idea of the food that's falling through the cracks. So we waste less in the end and compost what remains. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed what we had to share. I know is, quite a diversity of information. Here's the contact information. I'll turn it back to Natasha for the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you all three so much. It's a really interesting thread that a story that you wove together. We do have some questions, but a lot of it is just kudos and actually offers for those to connect you all to grants and potential thermometer donations. So, but first, one question for Bo that came in was whether, or for you as well, Sarah, because I know you're involved in this, but do you all accept meat and dairy in the feedstocks food scraps that you're composting, or is it veg only?
So I can answer that. We have been composting without meat and dairy for the last year, but now with the establishment of these newer sites, we're kind of allowing each host to determine for themselves what they are okay with accepting, knowing that the system meets, well beyond the regulated expectation of, being above 131 degrees for a few days. So we feel really good about, minimal risk for pathogens with the system that we have set up. And now that we've been able to test that and demonstrate that with a thermometer, we are, inviting hosts to accept meat and dairy if they wish to, again, with the caveat that there's ongoing temperature monitoring to ensure the safety. And I believe that Sarah's cooperative household will be doing that.
And we've got a fair number of pilots here in New York and a lot of experience accepting meat and dairy. The bones don't always decompose, but you can just throw them back into the next system.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to what Bo was saying about letting households make those decisions or the hosting spots. Um, this kind of scale is really to keep it as dispersed as possible, so it's not reliant on Bo and I and maybe John to operate. We really are hoping that each location that is hosting a compost culvert is maintaining it themselves, and we're a fallback if they have questions that they can't answer themselves. But this is really to empower each group, each community that's hosting one of these to fully operate it themselves.
Yeah, and before I turn it over to Carrie, I'll just say a lovely demonstration of following the best management practices and best, for community scale systems that you all are doing. I love to hear that you're starting with, safe and small and monitoring and learning and expanding as your confidence grows. So applaud you there. Carrie, do you want to unmute and go ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Tasha, and all of you. Thank you for your presentations. Really great. So many questions. But I'll start with just two really simple ones. One for as you distribute these, have these compost culverts, as you call them, I like the name, compost culverts around. Are you also supporting or providing or linking them up with sources for carbon materials to be balancing those things, or are that something the hosts are going to have to kind of figure out for themselves? How much brown are you using a 3-to-1 ratio in terms of volume? And then last question I have is on with those ridges, I could imagine after a couple of times getting really gunked up and stinky. And have you done this enough times to say, is that true? And then, or is not true?
So Carrie,
And
the
why not?
culverts are smooth bore on the inside.
They are. Oh,
Yeah, so
weird.
no issue with that. Yeah.
Okay.
And just by the way, we have piloted both 3-foot diameter and 4-foot diameter culverts. What you've seen in this presentation, by and large, are the 3-foot diameter culverts. But we can go up, or we have piloted both the 3 and the 4-foot, and there's some differences between those systems, but the 4-footers will more effectively compost meat and dairy, but the 3-footers, if managed well, can handle that also.
And it looks like Sarah maybe just put up
Yeah,
or
and
Bo
this
put up
is
this
just kind of
picture.
a photo of that. So once the pile has been, has entered the finishing stage, we pull that off, and it's quite lightweight. And then the compost at these sites, most of these sites, or all of them, are interested in setting up a garden. So they just use that compost on site for now. We might change that in the future if people are interested in sharing it or donating it. But yeah, it's a super simple process, and they haven't been gunked up yet.
And back to Carrie's question, 2-to-1 ratio, 2 parts carbon, 1 part food scraps is typically what we recommend. Dry, coarse wood chips.
I will also add, Carrie, there is an abundance of carbon, at least in Burlington, and I imagine pretty much anywhere. We do have the McNeil plant here, which it turns out after calling all the arborists in the area, I learned that's where they're all bringing their wood chips, which could be used for a much higher end use value, in my opinion, for community composting. But regardless, it's not really like there's competition. It's actually more so a matter of like holding space capacity. And so I just have the privilege of where I'm located, of like, I like am renting from someone who owns the house. And so there's a garage here where we will be storing a bunch of wood chips as we expand. But for now, we've just been gathering wood chips from community gardens. And then also we have an abundance of wood shavings. We can't even use, a tenth of what the local hardwood carpenter has to offer. And so even with our expansion, like there's still so much abundance. So that's sort of what we're like supporting in terms of operations, is making sure everybody is set up with what they need, you know, supporting with monitoring and answering questions and retrofitting as needed. And yeah, there's no shortage of materials.
And for now, you know, we've been helping with delivering that carbon to each site, but we're also providing the information and contacts so that people can continue to pick up that carbon as is needed, and fall back on us if they're not able to. So
Great. And we are right at the hour. I'm trying to be respectful of everybody's time. I'm going to get one more question that I think could be answered quickly, though, is whether if you mentioned, and I think you alluded to this, but maybe not explicitly, Bo, any critter issues that you've had. Someone in Essex Junction has had some issues with critters.
That's the question on everybody's mind, and that's why I love to champion this system. And I think John could speak to this much more than I could, as he's also in an area where critters are more of an issue. Well, bigger critters that can get over the height. I've actually not even had a lid on my setup, and nor have we used any hardware cloth underneath. However, like I had mentioned retrofitting before, there's different ways to adapt this design to meet those needs for site-specific concerns.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you all so much. We're going to have you back for a compost conversation to get into so many more details. I love the synergy and the community mycelia that you all are fostering and building, and really bringing that full food cycle, right? We're producing food, saving food, feeding people, addressing food justice and access issues, composting it, turning it back into soil and food. So I really appreciate and love everything that you guys are doing. There was a link that Rhonda provided for grants through CSWD. I'll make sure that you guys get that if you didn't capture that, and an offer for thermometers. And just a quick reminder that we do have one more session today, starting at 3 o'clock, on One Man's Journey to the Soil, and it's from a master gardener, master composter in Vermont, talking about soil health principles and how he came to realize the really focusing on soil was the way to go. So we hope some of you will join us back here in just about an hour. And in the meantime, thank you all so much to everybody for joining, and for our fabulous presenters. Take care and see you all soon.